So, what on earth does a dwarf launching a small ball have to do with the story of modern South Korea? Well, it's everything. It's the central image of one of the most important novels in Korean history. A dwarf launches a small ball. And today, we're going to unpack its incredible story.
The entire novel kicks off with this simple, unforgettable line. But it's not just about his father's height. It's a powerful statement about a whole class of people. The small, the overlooked, the ones left behind by a society that's changing at, like, lightning speed. And that's really the big question, isn't it? We're going to see how this one family's fight for a home becomes this powerful metaphor for a whole nation's growing pains. It's a story whose themes of inequality are honestly still shockingly relevant today. All right, so let's set the scene. The story takes place in a shanty town right on the edge of a city that's just exploding with growth. And the family, they live in a place with a name that's, well, it's deeply ironic. And their entire world is about to get bulldozed, all in the name of progress. I mean, just look at this. The government calls their neighborhood Paradise District, Happiness Town. It's such a cruel joke for the people who are actually living there in these makeshift homes. This is our first big clue that the official story of progress and the reality on the ground, they don't match up at all. At the very heart of this world, we have a family of 5. There's the father, a dwarf, who's a really skilled handyman, but his small size kind of makes him a symbol for the marginalized. Then you have his resilient wife, their 2 sons, and their young daughter. They all live in this simple brick house that the father built, piece by piece with his own 2 hands. It's their only piece of the world. And then everything changes. An official eviction notice just appears on their door. The whole area is going to be redeveloped. Now they're told they'll get an apartment ticket, basically the right to move into a brand new high-rise. It sounds like a dream come true, right? But as they're about to find out, it's actually a trap. Okay, so now we get to see how this trap actually works. The novel just lays bare the cold, hard numbers behind all this so-called development. And it forces the family into this impossible corner, which leads the daughter, Young-hoo, to make a really devastating choice. Because the family has no money saved up, their only real option is to sell that apartment ticket. And of course, real estate speculators are circling like vultures. They offer the family around 250,000 won. It's something, sure, but it's barely enough to cover the debts they already have. And this is the number that shows you just how rigged the game is. To actually use the ticket themselves, they would need 1.5 million won. It's a fortune, completely and totally out of their reach. You see, the system was never designed for them to succeed. It was designed for them to fail. So, this is the cycle, the illusion of choice. Step 1, you get a ticket that promises a better life. Step 2, you realize you can't possibly afford to use it. Step 3, you're forced to sell it for pennies on the dollar to speculators, who then turn around and make a massive profit. And step 4, the original residents are left homeless, pushed even further to the edges of society. Completely desperate, seeing no other way out, the youngest daughter, Young-hoo, makes the ultimate sacrifice. She goes with the man who bought their ticket, the very symbol of this predatory system, because she believes it's the only way she can possibly get back the one thing that represents her family's right to even exist. To really understand the raw power of this story, you have to know a little bit about the man who wrote it. Because for him, this wasn't just fiction. It was a reality he witnessed with his own eyes. An event so shocking, it pretty much forced him to start writing again. The author Cho Se-hui had actually stopped writing. He was working for a magazine and felt pretty disillusioned, like literature couldn't really change the world. But then, an assignment took him right to the front lines of Seoul's urban redevelopment. And this is the moment. This is what changed everything. While on that assignment, he saw demolition workers literally storm into a home while a family was in the middle of eating dinner, and they just smashed everything. The sheer brutality of that moment hit him so hard that on his way home, he bought a notebook and started writing what would become this incredible novel. And his commitment didn't stop with the book. After it was published in 1978, social conflicts got even more intense in the 80s. So Cho Se-hui famously put down his pen and picked up a camera. He became a photojournalist, documenting labor struggles like the Sabuk miners' uprising, always continuing to give a voice to the voiceless. So why? Why, over 40 years later, is this novel still a bestseller in Korea? The answer, I think, is in its tragic, poetic ending and its devastatingly timeless message. the small ball that the father launched. In many ways, it has never come back down to earth. So the father, having lost his home, his family's future, he feels completely defeated. His dream has always been to go to the moon, a place he imagines is peaceful and fair, so far away from the cruelty of Earth. In this final, desperate act, he climbs the smokestack of a factory, the highest point in his world, trying to launch a small paper airplane, like a message to the moon. And here is the story's final, absolutely heartbreaking twist. The daughter, Young-hee, she succeeds. Through everything she went through, she manages to steal back the apartment ticket. But when she returns home, victorious, she learns that her father has fallen from the smokestack to his death. Her personal victory is completely overshadowed by the ultimate price the system demanded. This incredibly powerful story has resonated for generations. It's sold over 3 million copies, and it remains a fixture on Korean bestseller lists. It's required reading in schools. It's a cultural touchstone that really speaks to the nation's shared memory of struggle and inequality. You know, the author himself had a really bittersweet take on his book's success. He once said that the novel's lasting popularity wasn't really something to celebrate. For him, it meant that the fundamental problems of inequality and injustice that he wrote about back in the 1970s, well, they still haven't been solved. And that leaves us with this final lingering question. The dwarf in the story represents anyone who's been marginalized by economic forces they can't control. And that small ball, that's the universal dream of a better, fairer life. In a world of rising housing costs, gentrification, and massive wealth disparity, you have to wonder how many people are still standing on their own smokestacks, launching impossible dreams toward a distant moon.
All right, let's jump right into a story that honestly is one of the most powerful pieces of modern Korean literature out there. It's called The Dwarf, and we're going to unpack why its message, about progress and poverty and just basic human dignity is unbelievably more urgent today than it was when it was written.
I mean, wow. The story just throws you headfirst into this family's desperation with that one single chilling line. It's not just a threat, it's a promise. A promise of vengeance that comes from a place of just deep, deep pain and injustice.
Okay, so to really get where this family's anger is coming from, we've got to rewind a bit. We're going back to the 1970s in South Korea. This was the time of that explosive economic growth. You've probably heard of it, the miracle on the Han River.
But see, behind all those shiny new skyscrapers and that swelling national pride, there was a whole other story unfolding in the shadows. And this novel, The Dwarf, it basically became the voice for those people. It tells the story of the very real human cost of that so-called miracle, and it zooms in on one family that's just fighting for its very existence.
Now, this is where the novel gets really, really clever. It doesn't just lecture you about inequality. No, it shows you. It does this by putting two families living in completely different universes side by side. So, on one hand, you've got the Dwarf's family, literally clinging to this tiny little shack in a neighborhood that's about to be bulldozed. And on the other, an industrialist family living in this sprawling, massive luxury apartment with these gorgeous river views. I mean, it's so much more than a difference in where they live, it's a total difference in worlds. And then you look at the kids, right? For the Dwarf's children, being young means a desperate struggle just to survive, working in factories. For the industrialist's kids, well, their life is all about expensive private tutors and these decadent parties where, for fun, they watch illegally imported pornographic films. One is just raw survival. The other? Pure excess. The contrast is just staggering.
And this right here, this is where we get to the absolute core of it all. Power. The Dwarf's family is completely, utterly powerless against being kicked out of their home. Meanwhile, the industrialist family, they have so much power, they can literally cover up a fatal hit and run, throw some money around, blame their driver, and just walk away without a single consequence.
You know, a gap this huge between two worlds, it just can't last forever.
That level of injustice is like a powder keg with a lit fuse. You just know eventually something has to break.
And it does. The dwarf's eldest son, young Zhu, he's pushed to his absolute limit, and he decides he's going to take justice into his own hands. So he gets a job at the industrialist factory, he sees the hopelessness of it all up close, and he decides he's going to assassinate the chairman. But in this absolutely tragic twist, he ends up killing the chairman's younger brother instead. So this desperate act of rebellion, it doesn't spark some big revolution. No, it just ends in personal tragedy. He's caught, he's tried, and he's sentenced to death. And his family, which was already broken, is now just completely shattered.
But wait, the story's not over, because there's a sequel novel, and it gives us this really shocking and honestly profound look from the other side of that divide.
This time, the whole story is told from the perspective of the industrialist's youngest son. He sees the fallout from his uncle's murder, and it starts to eat at him. He has this crisis of conscience, and he starts to realize that this system, this whole setup of inequality, it's like a poison that infects everybody, even the people you'd think are winning. It's such a powerful metaphor, and it really gets at the entire economic system the story is critiquing. It's not just some poetic title, it's the whole point. So let's break down what it actually means.
Okay, so first up you've got the fisherman. Pretty simple, right? The fisherman is the capitalist, the wealthy industrialist. His whole goal is to pull as much wealth, as many fish, out of the sea as he possibly can.
But here's the catch. The fish he's trying to pull in, they're thornfish. And the thornfish, well, they're the laborers. They've been so exploited, so squeezed dry, that they literally have nothing left to give. They're just bones and thorns. So instead of making the fisherman richer, they just end up tearing and destroying his net.
So you see the message here? It's crystal clear. By draining the workers of everything they have, the capitalist ends up destroying the very thing that creates his wealth in the first place. The net rips. The system breaks. It's a cycle that's doomed to destroy itself.
Okay, now let's bring this into our world, right now. Because this story, which was written over 40 years ago, feels shockingly, almost uncomfortably relevant today. Today we might not see that stark image of a shack right next to a mansion quite as often, but the separation is still there, maybe even more so. It's become this kind of invisible glass wall. The two worlds are completely sealed off from each other. They can't see, and they definitely can't understand, each other's reality. And the economic polarization that the novel talks about, it hasn't just continued, it's accelerated big time. Back in the 1970s, the top business group from the story was responsible for about 5% of Korea's exports. Today, a single top company can be responsible for around 20%. That gap hasn't just widened, it's become a chasm.
And let's be clear, this is not just a Korean story. This is a global story. Think about this. The combined wealth of just 62 of the world's richest individuals is equal to the wealth of the poorest half of the entire world's population. We're talking 3.6 billion people. The scale of that inequality it's just mind-boggling. It's almost impossible to really wrap your head around.
But at the end of the day, the author's message cuts through all the economics, all the politics, and it gets down to the most fundamental human need there is. It's about the struggle for dignity. The right to be treated like a human being with respect, no matter how much money you have or don't have. And that's the big provocative question that the dwarf leaves us wrestling with. Look around. Our world is filled with incredible technology, progress the author could never have even dreamed of. We've traded gas lamps for smartphones, for sure. But has that fundamental, core human struggle for a dignified life, has it really changed at all?